Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the League Encyclopedia. I'm your host, MsMuffinMan, and today's entry is all about jungle plants, or the living jungle as Riot wants us to call it. And there's only 3 of them, so this will be a rather quick episode, a little bite-sized one to contrast with the rather long patch breakdown from last week. And like I said, there's only 3, so we are going to talk about the Blast Cone, the Honeyfruit, and the Scryer's Bloom, and what they do, how they work, and a little bit about their respawn timers. So, let's get right into it. So let's start with the Blast Cone. Very straightforward. You hit it, people get knocked away / knocked up, and that is relevant for some interactions. And they can be launched up to 900 units away, which is about 3 times the radius of the little circle around the Blast Cone. And it will send units over terrain, so if you're near a wall or something, it can actually knock you over, and that is part of its mechanics. Other than that, there are 4 locations per half of the rift, or 2 rather per quadrant, and those are located here to get you into the Barren Pit, here, which could launch you into the blue buff pit, here, which can launch you over near the red buff, here, which can launch you into the Dragon Pit. Their respawn timers are anywhere between 5 and 7 minutes, and like I said, this is sort of a theme with respawn timers, or spawn timers in general. They're plants, I guess, so Riot was like, yeah, we can't really set a time, let's give them a range. Anywhere between 5 and 7 minutes, and that goes for all plants. I'm going to keep mentioning that. Other than that, we have a few additional blast cones that can spawn if we were on an infernal rift, and those are located here, near each tri-bush, near each tri-brush, near Gromp, by the wolf camp, here in front of each base's gate, or right here in the alcoves. Now there are a few inconsistencies in terms of behavior with the knockup that happens from the blast cone. So I'm not going to get into all the different list of what happens and what doesn't, because it's very difficult to remember and it's inconsistent, so it doesn't even make sense. There's no logic you can follow to why this one works and this one doesn't. So not going to get into that. However, I will say that if you blast an ally that then kills an enemy shortly thereafter, you actually get an assist for it if you do nothing else. So that is an interesting mechanic that, it's hard to take advantage of, but it's interesting to note. Moving right along into the Honeyfruit, we have several spawn locations, because they have, not only do they have a range of time where they can spawn, they actually also have a range of spots where they can spawn. But basically all you need to know is it's along the river, and you can see here on this image sort of all the green highlighted rings, bands rather, along the river. Those are the spots where it can spawn, and there can be up to 2 per river half, so there can be up to 4 Honeyfruit on the map at a time, but no more than that, and no more than 2 per half of the river. Now, the respawn timer for these is also between 5 and 7 minutes, but if there are 2 already, then that respawn timer obviously doesn't start ticking before they are taken away. Now, if you were on an ocean rift, there are additional spots where Honeyfruit can spawn, and these are set, these aren't arranged, and they're located right here, just outside the outer turret from mid, and right here just outside the red buff camp on either side of the map. And these actually do have a set respawn time of 2 minutes, and they spawn 30 seconds after the rift transforms. So if the ocean rift happens at minute 15, 30 seconds later, the first Honeyfruit spawns, and then 2 minutes after each subsequent taking of the Honeyfruit is when they will respawn. You can time that one. Now there is a couple fun interactions with the Honeyfruit, but not super interesting ones. The Rift Scuttler will actually try to eat it, blocking the fruit for up to 10 seconds, in which case it counts as being eaten, or you can just attack Rift Scuttler and she'll back away from it and the fruit is ready for the taking. And then, just like the Blast Cone, there's a little bit of an inconsistent behavior. The Honeyfruit will restore 5 Fury per... each fruit will restore 5 Fury for Renekton and Tryndamere, but it only gives 2 Fury for Shyvana, even though they all have a pool of 100 Fury. And before we move on to the Scryer's Bloom, I'm going to throw just a tiny bit of math at you in this video, because the Honeyfruit does deal with a little bit of percentages and maximum mana and sort of that thing. So, each fruit will restore 6% of your maximum mana, so it isn't a flat value or anything, it is actually dependent on how big your mana pool is. And then, just like we saw with the damage charts and stuff, it is the maximum value between 3.5% of your maximum health and 114 to 116 based on your level of health. And that roughly translates to this chart in terms of how much health you're getting per, like, depending on what level you are, because if you do some calculations with the maximum health, the odds of you, like, unless you're a tank, you're almost always going to get this value rather than the maximum health value. And that is it for the Honeyfruit. So let's move on to the Scribe's Bloom. Now, the Scribe's Bloom is easily the most mechanically simple of the three plants to talk about. So it's quite simple. You just hit it. It releases pollen, quote unquote, into the rift. That will reveal champions for 3 seconds if they were. It gives you true sight of a champion. Or non-champions, so like a ward or a team of mushroom, like I mentioned before, for up to 12 seconds. So that's quite a long time to take out those traps or wards, really. And their locations where they can spawn initially, not if you're on a special rift, is right here, just outside of Dragon Pit or Baron Pit, or right here, just outside of the blue buff, or right here, just at the entrance to the river on the back end of the blue buff. Unless you are on a Cloud Rift, in which case there are 2 additional ones where they can spawn, and that is right here in front of each base's gate, and right here in front of each tri-brush in the river. So that is actually mirrored with the Infernal Rift, except it Scribe's Blooms on the Cloud Rift. Then there are no crazy inconsistencies with interactions and what they reveal and what they don't reveal. The only thing is that only you can see where the range is, basically, that you're going to reveal. And there can only be 1 present per quadrant. So even though the map is a mirror and all that, and there's 8 spawn locations, there can only be 1 per quadrant, which means there can only be 4 on the map at a time. And the respawn timer, just like all the other plants, is anywhere between 5 and 7 minutes. And that's it, guys. That wraps up the informational bite-sized packet I have for you guys today. And I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And if there's anything I was unclear about or something you'd just like me to touch on a bit more, leave it down below in the comments and I'll try to clarify it.